Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
No matter how rowdy or loud they may get, children or even teenagers never seem to be the type capable of taking another person's life. Sadly enough, there are some rare cases in which that has happened. And in this Top 10 archive video, we're going to talk about some of the most infamous cases. Number 10. Carl Mahan. Carl Mahan was just 6 years old when he killed his former friend Cecil Van Hoos, a boy 2 years older than he, all because of a piece of scrap metal. It was May 18, 1929, when the two penniless children were searching their eastern Kentucky neighborhood in hopes of finding tin and aluminum bits to sell to a local junk dealer. They found what at the time could be considered a gold mine, a piece of iron. The two began to fight over it until Cecil hit Carl over the head with the rod. Carl then ran home as Cecil chased after him in rage. 6-year-old Mahan grabbed his father's shotgun, threatening to shoot Cecil, and he did. Carl was sentenced to 15 years in reform school for first-degree murder, but this was later overturned as he was issued a court-ordered writ of prohibition. Number 9. Mary Bell. In 1968, 11-year-old Mary Bell was convicted of killing 2 young boys, one of them being 3-year-old Martin Brown, and the other was 4-year-old Brian Howe. Mary strangled the eldest and left his body in an abandoned Newcastle, England residence. A short 2 weeks later, Mary Bell and her 13-year-old friend Norma Bell, of which there is no relation, strangled Brian Howe to death. They disposed of his body on the wasteland. When it was finally discovered, investigators noticed that the letter N had been cut into the boy's stomach, but someone else must have added an extra slope, creating an M. Both girls were tried and convicted of manslaughter, but Norma was later acquitted. Mary's penalty was life imprisonment, but only 12 years into her sentence, Bell was released and given lifelong anonymity. Number 8. Jordan Brown. February 20th, 2009, 11-year-old Jordan Brown shot and killed his father's fiancée, Kenzie Hook. At the time, she was pregnant, which answers the question as to why he was charged with double homicide. According to reports, Brown walked into her room and shot Hook with his youth model hunting rifle as she slept. The very next morning, he boarded the school bus as usual and went about his daily routine until the body was found by Hook's 4-year-old daughter, Adeline. Brown was arrested and charged as an adult in the murder after gunpowder residue was found on his shirt, along with statements from the victim's oldest daughter claiming he saw him with the weapon. Brown has been detained in juvenile facilities, and the case is ongoing. To this day, his father still attests to his son's innocence. Number 7. Lionel Tate. Lionel Tate became the youngest person ever to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This was announced in 2001 when the 14-year-old boy was convicted of first-degree murder after brutally beating up a 6-year-old girl 2 years earlier. On the night of the murder, his mother, Kathleen Tate, was babysitting the kids who were downstairs playing while she was taking a nap in order to prepare for the night shift as a Florida state trooper. A little under an hour later, Lionel told his mother that the 6-year-old, Tiffany Eunuch, wasn't breathing. She was pronounced dead at the hospital. He claimed that he used some wrestling moves from TV on her and they roughhoused a bit, but an autopsy would show much more. Serious injuries included a crushed skull, broken ribs, and a shredded liver that had been pushed through the ribcage. In a weird twist of fate, in 2004, Tate's conviction was overturned on the basis that his mental competency had not been evaluated before trial. From there, he was a free man serving 10 years of probation. A year later, in 2005, he violated his probation by committing armed robbery on a pizza delivery worker. Tate is now currently serving 30 years at a correctional institute in Florida. Number 6. Eric Smith. Eric Smith was just 13 when he sexually assaulted and murdered a 4-year-old living relatively nearby in his Steuben County, New York neighborhood. On August 2, 1992, Eric lured the 4-year-old, who was on his way to summer camp, just a mere 5 blocks away, into the woods and strangled him. He went on to sexually assault the boy with a stick and dropped a large rock onto his head. The victim, Derek Robbie, was walking alone for the first time because his mother had her hands full with the youngest of her children. Smith confessed to the murder and was sentenced to 9 years to life imprisonment. His next opportunity for parole is 2016. He has been denied parole 7 times since 2002. Number 5. Andrew Wurst. 14-year-old Andrew Wurst entered his 8th grade graduation dance armed with a .25 caliber pistol in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. His plans were to merely commit suicide, but he jumped at the chance to kill one of his teachers, John Gillette. Andrew fatally shot Gillette and injured another teacher and 2 other students during the outburst. The owner of the restaurant where the celebration was being held immediately reacted and pulled a shotgun on Wurst before taking him to the ground, searching him for other weapons. The teenager took a plea bargain in which he pled guilty to 3rd-degree murder and attempted murder, but in 1999 was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison before parole could be considered. Number 4. Thomas T.J. Lane. The Chardon High School shooting occurred on the 27th of February, 2012. Within 2 days of the tragic incident, 3 male students were pronounced dead. Others were injured and 1 left permanently paralyzed. Who would do such a thing, you may ask? The culprit was 17-year-old Thomas T.J. Lane. A .22 caliber handgun was used to carry out the murders. Although Lane claimed to have chosen his victims at random, eyewitnesses stated that it appeared his victims were targeted. In May of 2013, a judge determined that Lane was competent to stand trial. Soon thereafter, the decision was made to charge the 17-year-old from Ohio as an adult. T.J. Lane told his attorney not to put up a defense on his behalf. He then pled guilty to all 3 counts of murder and was sentenced to 3 life terms in prison. Perhaps the most disturbing facts about TJ's case is the lack of remorse he showed to his victims' families. He constantly smiled in the courtroom, mocked his victims' families with the middle finger, and wore a white t-shirt with the word "killer" written in black marker during his trial. Number 3. Mitchell Johnson and Andrew Golden. March 24, 1998 marks the date of the West Side Middle School Massacre. Andrew Golden, 11, and Mitchell Johnson, 13, had been planning the ambush for months before it actually occurred. On the morning of the shooting, the boys were able to sneak guns and an abundance of ammunition out of Andrew's grandparents' house and loaded it into Mitchell's parents' minivan. That day, Mitchell was marked absent from school, but Andrew attended in order to pull the fire alarm. As students and teachers single-filed through the doors, the 2 secured themselves in the nearby woods and opened fire. 4 students and 1 teacher were killed. 10 others were wounded. Under state law, they had to be tried in juvenile court. They were found guilty on 5 counts of murder and sentenced to be held in detention until reaching adulthood. Both Andrew and Mitchell were released from custody on their 21st birthdays. A mere 2 years after his release, Mitchell Johnson was again arrested for possession of a firearm, identity theft, and possession of marijuana. Number 2. Graham Young. Graham Young was a very young chemistry genius, studying so avidly that he acquired a postgraduate chemistry student's level of knowledge by the time he was just 14 years old. Unfortunately, Young used his gift for evil purposes. The teen poisoned his father, mother, sister, and grandmother. He was eventually institutionalized in 1962 at Broadmoor Hospital, but even poisoned the staff and fellow inmates at the maximum security hospital at which he was being housed. Upon release, Young went back to his old ways, poisoning many others for the short time that he was a free man. With good reason, he was sent back to prison for life. Interestingly enough, he died in 1990 from a heart attack. Graham Young was just 42 when he met his fate. Number 1. George Stinney Jr. George Stinney Jr. is the youngest person ever to be executed in the United States. The African-American boy from South Carolina was convicted of killing 2 preteen girls, 8 and 11, by beating them over the heads with a blunt object. No DNA evidence was gathered, and the only thing that could make this 14-year-old receive the guilty verdict was testimony from 3 Anglo-Saxon police officers that said he confessed, and the color of his skin. After just 10 minutes of deliberating, the jury announced the verdict. On June 16, 1944, Stinney's controversial death was carried out by means of electrocution by Old Sparky. A Bible was made into a booster seat, since previous criminals were all much taller than he. The case is still studied to some extent today and is considered to be a possible miscarriage of justice. As of 2014, Stinney's descendants are calling for a new trial to clear his name. Like these top 10 videos? Subscribe by clicking the annotation here and give our video a like. Have an idea for a future top 10? Leave a comment in the section below